My patient knew about the tunnels before I ever mentioned them. That should have been my first warning. Dr. Sarah Chen here. I'm a forensic psychologist for the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. For 15 years, I've interviewed dangerous individuals, analyzed disturbed minds, and documented the darkest corners of human behavior. I thought I'd seen it all. I was wrong. 3 months ago, the Boston Police Department contacted me about Marcus Holloway. He'd been found wandering the streets near Park Street Station, covered in dirt and a dark substance that wasn't his own. When they arrested him, he kept repeating the same phrase, "The children of the deep are hungry." What started as a routine psychological evaluation became something else entirely, something that forced me to question everything I believed about reality. This story combines real criminal investigation with elements that defy explanation. What you're about to hear happened to me. Every word is true. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this. Let me know in the comments what time you're watching and what city you're from. Now, let me tell you about the tunnels beneath Boston. The interview room at Suffolk County Jail smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Standard fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead as I arranged my notes. Marcus Holloway sat across from me, hands cuffed to the metal table. He was 34, thin, with hollow eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. "Hello, Marcus. I'm Dr. Chen. I'm here to evaluate your mental state." He didn't respond immediately. His fingers drummed a strange rhythm on the table. 5 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause, 5 taps again. The pattern felt deliberate, almost ritualistic. "Tell me about the night they found you," I said, activating my recorder. Marcus stopped drumming. His eyes focused on mine for the first time, and I felt an uncomfortable chill run down my spine. "You've been down there, haven't you, Doctor?" I frowned, my professional composure wavering slightly. "Down where?" "The old tunnels, the ones they sealed after the accident in 1943. He leaned forward, chains rattling. "You smell like them, like wet concrete and copper." My heart rate spiked. I had visited the abandoned subway tunnels 3 weeks earlier, researching for a different case involving urban exploration gone wrong, but I hadn't mentioned this to anyone. The smell he described was disturbingly accurate. How could he possibly know? "How do you know about those tunnels, Marcus?" I kept my voice steady, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. His laugh was hollow, echoing strangely in the small room, "Because that's where I found them, where they found me." He resumed his drumming pattern, more insistent now. 5 below, 3 across, 5 down. That's the code to get past the first seal. I wrote down the numbers, my hand trembling slightly. Something about this felt significant, dangerous even. "What did you find down there?" "The congregation of the deep." His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "They've been waiting so long, Doctor. Waiting for someone to complete the circuit." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I pulled my jacket tighter, trying to maintain professional distance, while my instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. The session continued for another hour, but Marcus revealed little more concrete information. He spoke in riddles about ceremonies, about ancient contracts, about people who went missing and were transformed. When I asked about the dark substance on his clothes, he smiled and said, "Offering completed." That smile haunted me. It wasn't the expression of someone mentally ill. It was the satisfied look of someone who had accomplished exactly what they set out to do. After he was escorted back to his cell, I sat alone with my notes, hands shaking as I reviewed what had just occurred. The numbers he'd given me felt important, urgent even. 5 below, 3 across, 5 down, and he knew about my tunnel visit. That was impossible unless someone had been watching me. The rational part of my mind suggested coincidence, lucky guesses, information gathered from other sources. But my gut told me something else entirely, something that made me check the locks on my car twice before driving home. I made a decision that would change everything. I was going back to those tunnels, but this time I wouldn't go unprepared. 2 nights later, I descended into the abandoned Tremont Street tunnel system, my backpack loaded with supplies I hoped I wouldn't need. The entrance I'd used before was through a maintenance hatch near the old Boylston station. I brought a stronger flashlight this time, along with my camera, voice recorder, pepper spray, and a knife I'd purchased that afternoon. The tunnels were exactly as Marcus had described them, which only increased my unease. Wet concrete walls wept moisture in steady streams. The air tasted metallic, coating my tongue with an unpleasant flavor that reminded me of old pennies. My footsteps echoed in the darkness, creating an unsettling symphony that seemed to announce my presence to whatever might be listening. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every sound could signal danger. I found myself spinning around constantly, certain I was being followed, but my flashlight beam revealed nothing but empty darkness. I followed the main passage for about 200 yards, my nerves stretched tighter with each step, before finding what Marcus might have meant by the first seal. A heavy metal door blocked further progress, its surface covered in rust and scratches that looked almost like claw marks. It had an old combination lock, the kind used on school lockers decades ago. 5 below, 3 across, 5 down. My hands shook as I tried the combination Marcus had given me. Part of me hoped it wouldn't work, that this would all prove to be an elaborate delusion. But the lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire tunnel system. Beyond the door lay a narrow corridor I'd never seen before, despite my previous exploration. The walls here were different. Older brick, not concrete. Symbols were carved into the mortar between stones. They looked like a mixture of Latin letters and something else, something that hurt my eyes to look at directly and seemed to writhe when caught in my peripheral vision. I photographed everything, my camera flash creating stark shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Each photo revealed details I hadn't noticed before, as if the tunnels were revealing their secrets one layer at a time. The corridor led to a wider chamber, and here I made my first real discovery. Personal belongings were scattered across the floor in neat piles, as if deliberately arranged. A purse, reading glasses, a cell phone with a cracked screen. I picked up the purse with trembling hands and checked the ID. Rebecca Martinez, age 28. The photo showed a smiling woman with dark hair and kind eyes. My stomach dropped. I remembered her case. Rebecca had vanished 6 months ago while walking home from work in downtown Crossing. The police found no trace of her, despite an extensive search. Yet here was her purse, deep underground, where no one should have been able to find it. I collected everything I could carry, my mind racing with implications. If Rebecca's belongings were here, where was she? And how many other missing persons cases might be connected to these tunnels? I prepared to leave, eager to report my findings to the police when I heard the sound, a low humming, almost like singing, coming from deeper in the tunnel system. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, calling to something primal in my brain. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, against every lesson learned from years of studying criminal behavior, I followed the sound deeper into the darkness. The humming led me through a maze of interconnected passages, each more disturbing than the last. The walls here were covered in more of those strange symbols, and I began to notice they weren't random. They formed patterns, telling some kind of story I couldn't decipher, but that filled me with growing dread. Finally, I reached another chamber, larger than the first. This one contained something that made my breath catch in my throat. Candles formed a perfect circle around the room, their flames dancing without any apparent air current. In the center stood an altar made of stacked stones. Dark stains covered its surface, stains that I didn't want to identify. But it was the walls that truly terrified me. They were covered in photographs, dozens of them. All showed the same thing. People I recognized from missing person reports scattered across my desk over the past 2 years. Rebecca Martinez was there, but not as she appeared in her driver's license photo. This Rebecca looked peaceful, serene, but there was something wrong with her eyes. They were too bright, too knowing, as if she had seen things that changed her fundamentally. David Kim, the graduate student who disappeared near Harvard, smiled in his photo with the same unsettling expression. Sarah Williams, the nurse who never made it home from her shift at Mass General, appeared to be sleeping, but her position suggested she was standing upright when the photo was taken. All of them looked transformed in some way I couldn't define, but that made my skin crawl. I was documenting everything, trying to maintain some semblance of professional objectivity, when my flashlight beam caught movement in the corner. A figure sat hunched against the wall, and I nearly dropped my camera in shock. "Don't run," the figure said. It was a woman's voice, weak but clear. "Please don't run. I've been alone so long." I approached slowly, every nerve ending screaming danger. The woman was elderly, maybe 70, wearing a torn dress that might once have been white. Her hair was long and tangled, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and filled with a desperate hope I hadn't seen in the photographs. "My name is Dr. Chen," I said, keeping my voice gentle despite my fear. "I'm here to help. What's your name?" "Eleanor Vance." She struggled to sit up straighter, and I could see she was malnourished, but not as frail as someone her age should be after extended captivity. I was the first. 1978. They took me during the blizzard. The numbers hit me like a physical blow. 47 years. She'd been down here for 47 years. "Eleanor, we need to get you out of here immediately. You need medical attention." She shook her head violently. "Can't leave. Not until it's finished. Not until the deep ones have what they need." Her voice carried an odd accent, as if she'd forgotten how to speak properly. "But you can leave, Doctor. You should leave now, while you still can. They don't have you yet." "Who are they, Eleanor?" "The congregation, led by the one who calls himself Father Depths. He was here when they brought me down. He was young then, maybe 40. Now he's old, but the deep ones keep him alive, keep all of us alive, until we're needed." She pointed to a passage I hadn't noticed before, darker than the others. "They take us down there, to the real chambers, the ones that connect to the old subway system and the harbor. The deep ones rise with the tide, and we feed them what they need." "Feed them what?" Eleanor's eyes grew distant, unfocused, as if she was seeing something I couldn't. "Life force, fear, pain, the things that make us human." She focused on me again with laser intensity. "But lately, they want more. They want someone who can open the final door, someone with knowledge of the mind, someone who understands how consciousness works." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. "Someone like a psychologist." "Yes, Doctor. Someone exactly like you." Eleanor told me her story in whispered fragments, constantly glancing toward the dark passage, as if expecting interruption. She'd been a librarian, working late during the blizzard of 78. Someone had called her name from an alley as she walked to her car. When she turned to look, hands grabbed her and dragged her down through a hidden entrance she never would have noticed otherwise. Father Depth was younger then, maybe 40, handsome, educated, convincing. He told me I was chosen, that I should feel honored, that the deep ones had been sleeping beneath Boston since before the city was built, since before humans walked this continent. According to Eleanor, the subway construction in the early 1900s had disturbed their rest, awakening something that should have remained dormant. The congregation had formed shortly after, dedicated to appeasing these ancient entities. They've been feeding the deep ones for decades, taking people during storms, blackouts, any time when disappearances could be explained away. The victims were kept alive in the deeper tunnels, used in rituals. She shuddered, unable to continue. But it wasn't enough. Eleanor continued after a moment. The deep ones grow hungry. They want to rise fully, to reclaim the surface world. For that, they need the right opening. What's the right opening? A ritual that requires specific knowledge, understanding of human consciousness, of how the mind connects to deeper realities. They tried to force it from other captives, but failed. Psychology wasn't advanced enough back then. Until now, the implications crashed over me like a tide. They meant me. Somehow the congregation had learned about my research, my visits to the tunnels. They'd arranged for Marcus to be found, counting on my curiosity to bring me into their web. How many of them are there? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Maybe 20 active members above ground, more below. Some have been here as long as me. Others are recent recruits who thought they were joining something beneficial. Eleanor's voice grew urgent. But doctor, you have to understand. This isn't just human madness. The deep ones are real. I've seen them during the high rituals. They're ancient, and they're hungry, and they want out. I helped Eleanor to her feet, surprised by how light she was. Whatever was happening here, I wouldn't leave her behind. But as we prepared to navigate back through the maze of tunnels, we heard footsteps echoing from multiple directions. Too late, Eleanor whispered, her face pale with terror. They know you're here. The footsteps belonged to 3 figures in dark robes, moving with practiced silence through the tunnels. They carried modern LED lanterns that threw harsh white light across the brick walls, destroying the concealing shadows. I pulled Eleanor behind the altar, my hand instinctively reaching for the knife in my backpack. Dr. Chen, one of them called. His voice was cultured, educated, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. We know you're here. There's no point in hiding. I recognized the voice but couldn't place it immediately. The figure pushed back his hood, revealing a man in his 60s with silver hair and expensive glasses. He looked like a college professor, someone you trust with your children's education. I'm Father Depths, he said, his tone conversational. Though you might remember me as Dr. William Ashford from the university psychology department. The name hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Dr. Ashford had been my mentor during graduate school, the man who'd shaped my understanding of human psychology. He'd disappeared 7 years ago, supposedly moving to California for a private practice. I'd respected him, trusted him, even considered him a father figure. Hello, Sarah. You've grown into everything I hoped you would. Your research into consciousness and altered states has been invaluable to our work. I struggle to process this betrayal. William, what is this? What have you become? He smiled, the same kind expression I remembered from our mentoring sessions, now twisted into something sinister. I've found truth, Sarah. Real truth, not the limited understanding we get from textbooks and peer review. He gestured to his companions. The deep ones showed me realities beyond human comprehension. In exchange, I helped them prepare for their return by kidnapping people, by keeping them prisoner, by offering transcendence. His eyes held the fervor of a true believer, bright with fanatical certainty. Every person we bring to them becomes part of something greater. They don't perish, Sarah. They become conduits for ancient wisdom, bridges between worlds. One of his companions whispered something urgently in his ear. Father Depths nodded, his expression becoming more serious. The tide is rising. It's time for the final ritual. We need you to open the last door, Sarah. Your understanding of consciousness will allow the deep ones to merge fully with our reality. And if I refuse... He gestured toward Eleanor, and I noticed one of his companions had drawn a curved blade that gleamed in the lantern light. Then she suffers, along with all the others we've kept alive, but you'll participate anyway. The deep ones are very persuasive once you meet them properly. I looked at Eleanor, saw the resignation in her eyes. She'd probably heard similar threats for 47 years. But I also saw something else, a spark of defiance that imprisonment hadn't been able to extinguish. "Run," she whispered, so quietly, I almost missed it. Then she lunged at the nearest robed figure, moving with surprising speed and strength. She knocked his lantern to the ground, and the chamber plunged into chaos as shadows danced wildly across the walls and flames spread across scattered papers. I ran into the darkness, Eleanor's sacrifice buying me precious seconds to escape. I stumbled through the darkness, using my failing flashlight to navigate deeper into the tunnel system. Behind me, I could hear shouts and pursuit, multiple voices coordinating a search. Eleanor's diversion had bought me time, but not much. The passages here were different from anything I'd seen before. The brick gave way to stone that felt ancient, pre-industrial, carved with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when I wasn't looking directly at them. The air grew thick and humid, carrying the smell of salt water and something else, something organic and fundamentally wrong. My flashlight beam began to flicker, and panic set in. I had spare batteries, but changing them would mean stopping, and I could still hear pursuit behind me. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow faintly with their own light, providing just enough illumination to keep me moving. I emerged into a vast underground chamber that defied architectural possibility. The ceiling disappeared into blackness above me, and ancient columns supported structures I couldn't see. The space felt enormous, like a cathedral built for giants, and in the center of it all was a pool of black water that reflected no light, as if it absorbed photons rather than bouncing them back. Around the pool's edge, I saw them, the missing people from the photographs. They stood motionless, their eyes closed, swaying slightly as if listening to music I couldn't hear. Their clothes were gone, replaced by simple white robes that seemed to glow in the dim light. They looked peaceful, serene, but there was something profoundly wrong with their posture, their movements. They swayed in perfect unison, like reeds in an invisible wind. "Welcome to the true temple." Father Depths emerged from another passage, no longer bothering with stealth. His two companions flanked him, and I could see more robed figures positioned around the chamber's perimeter. I was surrounded, trapped. "This chamber connects to the harbor through underwater passages," he explained conversationally, as if giving a lecture. "The deep ones built it centuries ago, long before Europeans arrived in Boston. We simply rediscovered it and put it to its proper use." "What did you do to those people?" "We opened their minds, removed the barriers that separate human consciousness from deeper realities. They're still themselves, Sarah, but they're also something more. They can hear the deep ones singing. They understand their purpose in the greater scheme of things." As if responding to his words, the figures around the pool began to move in unison. They raised their arms toward the invisible ceiling and started a low, harmonious humming that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself, through my bones, through my very soul. The black water in the pool began to ripple, though there was no wind in the chamber. "It's starting," Father Depths said, with satisfaction. "The deep ones are rising. All we need now is for you to speak the final words, to use your understanding of consciousness to complete the bridge between worlds." "What makes you think I'd do that?" He nodded to his companions. They dragged Eleanor into the chamber. She was unconscious, a dark stain spreading from a head wound, but she was breathing. "But you're a healer, Sarah. You won't let innocent people suffer if you can prevent it." He produced a knife from his robes, its blade inscribed with the same writhing symbols I'd seen throughout the tunnels. "Complete the ritual, and everyone here lives to see transformation. Refuse, and they experience agony beyond description." The water in the pool was definitely moving now, creating patterns that hurt to look at, geometries that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Something vast was rising from depths that couldn't possibly exist beneath Boston. I had to make a choice. and I had to make it fast. Part 7. The truth about Marcus. Before I do anything, I said, buying time while my mind raced through possibilities, I want to understand, how does Marcus Holloway fit into this? Father Depp smiled, pleased by what he interpreted as cooperation. Marcus was our first successful test. We needed to know if the ritual components would work before attempting the full ceremony. He gestured toward the pool, where the water was now forming impossible spirals that made my eyes water. We gave him a partial opening, enough to confirm he could serve as a conduit. So you let him get caught, let him be arrested. We arranged for him to be found in a location and state that would guarantee police involvement. His job was to bring you to us, to make you curious enough to investigate. The smile widened. Your mentor from the university recommending you study the case was just a happy coincidence. My blood froze in my veins. My mentor, Dr. Patricia Wells. She's been one of us for 3 years now, ever since we helped her through her difficult divorce. His tone was almost sympathetic. She was so grateful for our support, so eager to belong to something meaningful. I thought of Dr. Wells, who had indeed gone through a messy separation 3 years ago, who had seemed different afterward, more confident, but also more distant, more secretive. She'd been the one to suggest I evaluate Marcus, claiming the case would be perfect for my expertise. You've been watching me for months, I realized. Years, actually. Ever since William told us about your potential, your research into consciousness, your work with criminal psychology, your papers on altered states of awareness, perfect preparation for what we needed. The humming from the robed figures grew louder, more complex, creating harmonies that seemed to resonate in dimensions I couldn't perceive. The pool's surface broke, revealing something rising from below. I caught a glimpse of what might have been tentacles, or arms, or something that was both and neither. The deep one comes, Father Depp announced with religious fervor. Speak the words of opening, Sarah. Bridge the gap between human consciousness and the ancient mind. He held the knife to Eleanor's throat, and I saw her eyes flutter open. Even injured, even after decades of captivity, she looked at me with determination rather than despair. I looked around the chamber, at the dozens of missing people swaying in their trance, at the impossible thing rising from the black water, at my former mentor, who had betrayed everything I believed about human nature. And I made my choice. I'll do it, I said, raising my hands in apparent surrender. But I need to prepare properly. This kind of consciousness work requires specific mental states, specific protocols. Father Depp lowered the knife slightly, but kept it ready against Eleanor's skin. Of course, take the time you need. We've waited this long. I walked slowly toward the pool, my mind racing through everything I knew about group psychology, hypnosis, and crowd control. The thing in the water was almost fully immersed now. It was larger than I'd expected, maybe 12 feet tall, with features that shifted between aquatic and humanoid. Its eyes were black pearls that reflected intelligence far older than humanity, and looking into them made me feel like an insect being studied by a scientist. The missing people continued their humming, but I noticed something Father Depp apparently hadn't. Their movements weren't perfectly synchronized. Some lagged behind the others. Some showed signs of strain around their eyes, micro-expressions that suggested they were fighting against whatever control held them. Eleanor had been right. The deep ones kept people alive, but that meant some part of their original selves remained intact, buried but not destroyed. The consciousness bridge requires specific psychological preparation, I announced, projecting my voice clearly through the chamber. Everyone here needs to focus on my words. The ritual will fail if even one person is not properly aligned. I began to speak in the cadenced tone I used for therapeutic hypnosis sessions. It was a technique for inducing altered states, but not the kind Father Depp expected. Focus on my voice. Feel your individual awareness separate from the collective consciousness. Remember who you were before this place. Remember your names, your lives, your choices. Remember what makes you human. Some of the swaying figures began to slow their movements. "What are you doing?" Father Depps demanded, suspicion creeping into his voice. "Preparing the ritual." I lied smoothly. "This is standard consciousness work. The subjects need to be in the proper mental state, fully aware of their individual identity before they can transcend it." But several of the robed figures were no longer humming in unison. They were looking around the chamber with confused expressions, as if waking from a long dream. The deep one in the pool let out a sound like well song, mixed with grinding metal. It was clearly agitated by the disruption to the harmony. "Stop," Father Depps commanded. "You're disrupting the synchronization." "Rebecca Martinez," I called out, spotting the woman from the photographs. "Remember walking home from work on Tremont Street. Remember your apartment on Beacon Hill, your cat Whiskers, your sister Maria who's been searching for you every day since you disappeared." Rebecca stopped swaying entirely. Her eyes snapped open, focusing on me with growing awareness and confusion. "David Kim. Remember your dissertation research on quantum consciousness. Remember your girlfriend Sarah waiting for you to come home. Remember the restaurant where you were planning to propose." One by one, the missing people began to break free from whatever mental control held them. The chamber filled with confused voices as they remembered their identities, their lives, their connections to the world above. Father Depps raised his knife toward me instead of Eleanor. "You don't understand what you're doing. Without the ritual, the deep ones will take what they need by force. Everyone in this chamber will perish horribly." The thing in the pool was fully emerged now, towering over us with arms that were too long and too flexible. Water cascaded from its form, but the liquid was no longer black. It was dark red, viscous, clearly not water at all. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of teeth that belonged on no earthly creature, and it let out a sound that bypassed my ears and vibrated directly in my bones. But I had one more card to play. "Eleanor," I called to the injured woman who was struggling against her captors with renewed strength. "You said you were the first. You've been here longer than anyone. You know how this place really works." Eleanor met my eyes and nodded, understanding passing between us. "The controls," she whispered, then louder, "the old subway controls. They sealed these tunnels for a reason in 1943. Father Depps went pale, his composure cracking for the first time. "No, you don't understand the consequences. You'll destroy everything." But Eleanor was already moving, faster than someone her age should have been able to after decades of captivity. She broke free from her captors and lunged toward a section of wall I hadn't noticed before. Ancient metal controls were mounted there, green with corrosion, but still functional, still connected to the city's infrastructure. "The deep ones need the connection to the harbor," she explained as she worked, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Cut the water flow, disrupt the pressure differential, and they can't maintain their presence here." The entity in the pool let out another sound, this one clearly distressed. It began moving toward Eleanor with liquid grace, but the newly awakened captives blocked its path. 47 years of captivity had given Eleanor something I hadn't expected, detailed knowledge of how to fight back. The whole tunnel system was designed to flood if necessary. Eleanor continued, her hands working levers that hadn't moved in decades, to prevent contamination from reaching the surface during the original construction. "You'll drown us all," Father Depps shouted, genuine panic in his voice for the first time. "Maybe," Eleanor replied with grim determination, "but it's better than letting them reach the surface world." The deep one reached toward her with impossibly long arms that seemed to stretch across the chamber. At the same moment, Eleanor pulled the final lever with both hands. Water erupted from hidden channels in the chamber walls with tremendous force, not the black liquid from the pool, but clean harbor water under pressure that had been building for 80 years. The robed figures scrambled for higher ground as the chamber began to flood rapidly. The deep one shrieked as the new water mixed with its pool. Steam rose where they met, and the creature began to dissolve like salt in acid, its form losing cohesion. "Everyone, up the passages," I shouted over the roar of water. "Move now." The newly awakened captives needed no encouragement. They scrambled toward the exits as water rose around their ankles, then their knees, but Father Depths and his remaining followers were not giving up easily. "You've doomed us all," he screamed over the sound of rushing water. "They'll come back. They always find a way back." He lunged at me with his blade, desperation making him reckless. I managed to dodge, but he caught my arm, drawing a line of fire across my bicep. Then Eleanor was there, 47 years of suppressed rage finally finding an outlet. She tackled my former mentor, and they both went down into the rapidly rising water. I tried to reach them, but the current was too strong, pulling me toward one of the exit passages. The last I saw of Eleanor Vance, she was holding Father Depths underwater with grim determination, ensuring he couldn't escape to rebuild his congregation elsewhere. I followed the other survivors up toward the surface, leaving the chamber to its flood, Eleanor's sacrifice echoing in my mind. The rescue operation took 6 hours and involved multiple city departments. 23 people emerged from those tunnels, some missing for over a decade. The youngest had been gone for 6 months. The oldest, besides Eleanor, had vanished 8 years ago. The Boston police and FBI descended on the scene, turning the subway tunnels into a crime scene that would take months to fully investigate. I spent 3 days in the hospital, being treated for hypothermia, exhaustion, and the knife wound on my arm. The survivors were scattered across various medical facilities, receiving both physical and psychological care. Most were suffering from severe malnutrition and what psychiatrists labeled induced dissociative states. When I was finally released, Detective Morrison from the Boston PD interviewed me extensively about what we'd found underground. The official report will focus on the cult aspects, he told me during our final session: human trafficking, kidnapping, multiple cases of false imprisonment. We found enough evidence in the accessible tunnels to prosecute anyone involved who survived.
What about the other elements? The things that can't be easily explained?
Morrison was quiet for a long time, staring out the window of his office. "There are some things we're not including in the public report. The chamber you described was completely flooded when we reached it. Whatever was down there is gone now." He turned back to me. "But off the record, we found things in those tunnels that don't make sense. Artifacts that our archaeologists say shouldn't exist. Symbols that match no known language. And some of the survivors, they know things they shouldn't know." But I knew it wasn't that simple. 3 weeks after the rescue, I received a call from Marcus Holloway. He'd been released from jail pending his psychological evaluation, which had been expedited given the circumstances. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice clearer than it had been during our original session, "I wanted to thank you. Whatever you did down there, it worked. The voices in my head are quiet now. Marcus, do you remember what happened to you? How you became involved with the congregation?" "Some of it. They found me during a difficult time in my life. I'd lost my job. My girlfriend had left me. I was struggling with depression. They offered answers, purpose, community. I thought I was joining a support group." His voice grew heavy with regret. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt. The things they made me do, the people I helped them find. It's not your fault. You were being controlled. Maybe, but I remember enough to know that what you stopped was real. The deep ones, the rituals, all of it. And Dr. Chen, it's not over." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" Father Depths had followers all over the city. Some of them weren't in the tunnels that night. They're still out there, and they're not happy about what happened. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "How do you know this?" "Because they've been watching your apartment building. That was 3 months ago." Since then, I've relocated twice, changed my phone number, and taken a leave of absence from my job. But Marcus was right. They're still watching. I see them sometimes, standing across the street from my new apartment. Different faces, but the same patient observation, the same sense of waiting. They don't hide anymore, which somehow makes it worse. They want me to know they're there. Rebecca Martinez visits me occasionally. She's in intensive therapy, trying to rebuild her life after nearly a year of captivity. She tells me she still dreams about the black water, still hears the humming in quiet moments. It changed us, she said during her last visit. Being down there, being connected to those things. Sometimes I know things I shouldn't know. Sometimes I hear conversations from blocks away. Yesterday, I knew my neighbor's cat was hurt before she did. The other survivors report similar experiences, enhanced senses, occasional flashes of precognition, dreams filled with imagery from deep ocean trenches they've never seen. The psychiatrists call it trauma-induced hypervigilance, combined with heightened pattern recognition, but I'm not sure that's all it is. The changes aren't limited to the rescued captives. I've noticed alterations in myself as well. Colors seem more vivid. I can sense people's emotional states from across a room. Sometimes, late at night, I hear that humming again, faint but unmistakable. Last week, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a photograph of Eleanor Vance, taken sometime in the 1970s, when she was still a librarian. She looked young, hopeful, completely unaware of what awaited her. On the back, someone had written in elegant handwriting, "She knew the price of defiance, so do we." The message was clear. They blamed me for Eleanor's sacrifice, for the destruction of their ritual, for the apparent elimination of their deep one. But the word apparent kept haunting me. Had we really stopped them, or just delayed them? I've given copies of this account to multiple people, along with instructions to release it if anything happens to me, because I think the public has a right to know what's underneath their city, what's probably underneath other cities too. The tunnels may be flooded, but the congregation of the deep had decades to establish themselves. Farther depths mentioned followers in other cities during our confrontation. Other rituals, other attempts to open doors between worlds. Yesterday, I got a call from Detective Sarah Kim in Seattle. 7 people have gone missing near the waterfront there over the past month. The only trace of them was found in an abandoned building, photographs arranged in a circle around an altar made of stacked stones, the same arrangement we'd found in Boston. "Dr. Chen," she said, "we found your contact information in a federal database of cult-related incidents. Can you help us understand what we're dealing with?" The pattern was starting again, spreading like a virus from city to city. 2 days ago, Rebecca called me in a panic. "I'm seeing them in my dreams," she said. "The deep ones. They're not gone, Dr. Chen. They're angry, and they're calling to others like them. The flooding didn't eliminate them, it just made them adapt. I'm starting to understand that what we encountered beneath Boston was just one tentacle of something much larger. The congregation wasn't just a local cult. It was part of a network connected to similar groups in coastal cities around the world. This morning, I found a symbol carved into my apartment door, the same writhing design I'd seen in the tunnels. When I touched it, my hand came away wet with salt water, though we're 15 miles from the ocean. I'm writing this final entry from a train heading west. I can't stay in one place anymore. They've made it clear that hiding isn't an option, but running isn't a solution either. I've decided to take a more active approach. If there are other cells, other rituals being planned, then someone needs to stop them before they succeed. Eleanor Vance sacrificed 47 years of her life to prevent one ritual. I won't let her sacrifice be meaningless. The survivors from Boston are staying in touch, forming our own kind of network. We share information, watch for signs, try to help each other cope with the changes we're all experiencing. Rebecca has started having visions of other locations, other groups. David Kim, the former graduate student, is using his research skills to map connections between missing person cases in different cities. If you're listening to this, if you live in a city with old subway tunnels or extensive underground systems, pay attention to missing person reports. Look for patterns. Watch for groups that seem too interested in consciousness research, in psychological techniques, in altered states. And if you ever hear humming coming from storm drains or subway grates, don't investigate alone. Contact the authorities, but also contact me. Leave a message with the name of your city and the location where you heard the sound. The email address is deepwatchnetwork@protonmail.com. We're building a database, connecting the dots, preparing for what's coming next. Because make no mistake, something is coming. The deep ones are patient, but they're not dormant. Eleanor bought us time, but time isn't a permanent solution. 3 nights ago, I had a dream. I was standing on a beach at low tide, looking out at the ocean. The water was black, just like in the pool, and it was receding much further than it should. As I watched, structures began to emerge from the ocean floor. Ancient buildings, massive and alien, stretching to the horizon. Then the tide began to turn. In the dream, I could hear Eleanor's voice carried on the wind. The deep ones don't just live beneath individual cities, Sarah. They live beneath the ocean itself. What you stopped was just the beginning. I woke up with salt water on my pillow. The train is pulling into Chicago now. I have contacts here, people who've reported strange disappearances near the lakefront. The pattern might be spreading to inland water sources, adapting to new environments. Share this story if it resonated with you. Drop your thoughts in the comments about what you think happened in those tunnels, but more importantly, tell me if you've noticed similar patterns in your own city. Missing people, unexplained sounds from underground, groups that seem too interested in consciousness research. And subscribe for more investigations into the darkness that hides beneath our everyday world, because this story isn't over. It's just beginning. The truth is out there. Sometimes it's right underneath our feet, and sometimes it's rising to meet us. Remember, the deep ones are patient, but they're not gone. They're adapting, learning, spreading. Eleanor Vance showed us they can be fought. Now it's up to us to continue that fight. Stay vigilant, stay connected, and if you hear the humming, don't ignore it. The children of the deep are still hungry.